Perfect. So thank you very much. It's my absolute pleasure to be here with you. And today I will invite you to take a plunge with me into the pool of tears and explore aquatic enchantment in Lewis Carroll's Alice Tales. So water holds a special significance in the Victorian era. The romantic view of Mother Nature as a gentle cradle, an inspirational, benevolent nurturer, is exchanged for a less sentimental, scientifically informed Darwinian understanding. Nature is read in tooth and claw, a site for a competitive struggle for survival, fueled by forces disinterested in the destinies of humans who seek to tame the wilderness, frightening and fascinating them. The 19th century shift from natural philosophy to a technoscientific episteme coincides with an urge to control nature, including the metamorphic aquatic substance via the instrumentalization of steam, the regulation of rivers, the construction of sewage systems, and sanitary reforms meant to safeguard against epidemics by purifying polluted drinking water and eliminating miasma generating disease. This comprehensive aquatic discipline can be regarded as symptomatic of the era. As Jules' law suggests, a parallel may be drawn between the technological, the bureaucratic, and social moderation of external waters and internal body fluids. The communal concerns regarding the embankment of rivers, the transfusion of human blood, the pasteurization of milk, or the mothering by vet nurses reflect collective anxieties about the impending liquefaction of the illusorily solidified bourgeois subjectivity. Victorian cultural imagination endows water with a subversive border-crossing potential that may disrupt hegemonic social order, rational meaning-making mechanisms, and static bodily beings alike. A stunning range of aquatic phantasmagorias include freak show exhibit Fiji Mermaid, leaking vessels of sexualized females' bodies, prostitutes drowning themselves into rivers, dirty father themes mocked in Punch Humor magazine as Cloaca Maxima or Monster Soup, urban legends about eels invading London homes through water faucets. So the fantasies about water, an ambiguous, shape-shifting, metamorphic entity, an agent of cleansing and contamination, mirror a cognitive dissonance matching the era's epistemological crisis. The amateur scientists of the times who were preoccupied with fern fever, taxidermy craze, paleontological fossil hunting, microscopy, astronomical lectures, dissection theater, and above all, the Darwinian evolutionary theory aimed to collect, witness, and catalog nature that turned out to be unknowable, a source of inexhaustible wonders, and hence a subject of fantastification. Popular science books associated natural phenomena examined with new technological devices. I hope that my presentation can go on. Stuck for some reason. A single drop of water studied through the lens of a microscope was associated in these popular scientific science books with the wondrous words of fairy realms and proofs for the existence of an almighty God. So this conflicted Victorian frame of mind simultaneously employed scientific, religious, and phantasmatic worldviews to make sense of reality. In the tiniest piece of mold on a decayed fruit, the tiniest animalcule from the stagnant pool, will imagination find inexhaustible wonders and fancy a fairyland, writes Charles Kingsley in How to Study Natural History. The slime from a rock pool teems with fairy forms darting about, a line we find in Arabella Buckley's The Fairyland of Science. Or another quote from Agnes Catlow's Drops of Water, their marvelous and beautiful inhabitants displayed by the microscope. The quote goes, "The glass of wizard science, the wonderful power of creator, is clearly manifested in the formation of the smallest animalcule, in the miracles of minuteness." So this rhetoric of wonder proves that the Victorian techno-scientific progress did not mean an alienation of humans from the nature world, but rather a growing interest in the agentality of non-human living matter. An increasing environmental awareness led to the eco-critical conceptualization of water. More than a cultural metaphor, water came to be seen as a vital player of interactive becomings, of the material entanglements of beings and things. Aquatic Enchantment defines the hybrid genre of Victorian scientific fairy tale fantasy. A major work is Charles Kingsley's Water Babies, a fairy tale for a land baby, published in 1863, written by the Anglican clergyman, historian, social reformer, author for his 5-year-old son, published serialized in Macmillan's magazine, illustrated by Sir Noel Paton. The story focuses on the adventures of a poor little orphaned chimney sweep, Tom, a dirty little brute whose desire to be clean induces a magic metamorphosis. He transforms into a water baby, a tiny gilt homunculus who is capable of conversing with frogs, fish, newts, water monkeys, and river fairies on his pilgrimage to the other end of Nova. In the spirit of natural theology, a didactic moral fable combines Christian parable, Darwinian biology lesson, fairy tale fantasy, and socialist tract against child labor. A Bildungsroman plot is shaped by a speciesist ideology. Tom is redeemed to mature into a great man of science. Kingsley, however, self-ironically draws a parallel between the speculative cognitive processes involved in religious faith, scientific hypothesis, and imaginative fancy, all except doubt as a part of knowledge grounded in a belief in unjustifiable truth. Water babies may exist just as well as dinosaurs did, and microbes, or steam power do, or love that makes the world go round. All of them are wonders of nature, bordering on the impossible. The book ends with a tongue-in-cheek conclusion, proclaiming itself to be only a fairy tale. It urges readers to believe none of it, even if it's true. With a similar twisted logic, Lewis Carroll's Alice confirms the veracity of her Wonderland adventures by admitting her disbelief upon finding herself in a fairy tale come true. The blurring of the distinctions between the potentiality of the make-believe, the what if, and then the actuality of lived reality, the what is, stages this kind of a drifting back and forth between the desire for enchantment and the need for rationality. Melanie Keane considers Carroll's Alice an influential commentary on the relationships between scientific reasoning and fantastical imagining, didacticism and childish curiosity, the natural world and its peculiarities, and the strangeness lurking just beneath the surface of or on the other side of the quotidian. A reason of the Carrollian Earth's timeless appeal is the fluidity of literary nonsense. It can be interpreted in so many ways through the lens of social criticism, language philosophy, child psychology, esoteric mysticism, satirical anti-tale, and scientific fairy tale fantasy. The Alice books abound in mocking allusions to Victorian techno-scientific innovations, ranging from photography through railways to microscopes or telescopes, from the theory of evolution and the science of dreams to mock scientific gambits as animal magnetism or the diminishing universe theory. The tale reads as a humorous rewriting of a travel narrative, with a young naturalist entering a wild territory where codes of conduct and signs of civilization have become useless or turned upside down, as Lawrence Telerak Wilmers writes. Through a curious hybridization, scientific references are mingled with fairy tale tropes to express the wonder of nature. The biological facts can be stranger than fiction, and also to criticize new definitions of the natural world, to mock human supremacy. Already Wonderland's prefatory poem establishes a watery framework. In the bucolic idyll of a golden afternoon boating trip, the storyteller and his child friends are leisurely gliding on river Isis. The kinetic memory of being cradled by the waves induces a dreamlike state, a weightless feel of free floating. The story is drained from the wells of fancy, also, as we learn. Spell pattern prevails. Alice's fall down the rabbit hole feels like a plunge down into a deep well that represents the unconscious, the unknown, subterranean realms of dreams and desires, as for example in the Grimm's fairy tale The Frog Prince. But it's also a reference to a more down to earth geological interest. Alice wonders if she starts digging a hole where she will end up on the other side of the earth. The well motif returns at the Mad Tea Party, where liquids flow uncontrollably in a carnivalesque manner. The Dormouse tells her tales about three little sisters who dare to draw from a treacle well all manners of things, beginning with an M. The cultural reference to the healing waters of pilgrimage sites is conveyed by a nonsensical language games that is grounded in category confusion and acoustic connection when random non-watery assemblages like mousetraps, moon, memory, and muchness emerge from the watery depths. The most memorable aquatic adventure in Wonderland is, of course, the Pool of Tears episode in Chapter 2. Alice is overwhelmed by her sudden size changes. Grown to 9 feet tall, she cries so much that she creates a literal sea of tears. Later, she shrinks and finds herself swimming in this pool with other animals. Then they try to dry themselves with a crazy chasing game called Cocos Race and a dry, very boring story about British history. A biographical inspiration behind the grotesque scene is Carroll and Duckworth's rainy excursion with the little girls to Nuneham, recorded in a diary entry of the 17th of June, 1862, deleted from the final version for fear of its inaccessibility to the general readers. Becoming Wet is interestingly a memorable adventure because it breaks the decorum of Victorian bodily discipline, a regression to a level of infantile naughtiness akin with playing in puddles and mud. It also reminds of the vulnerability of human bodies endangered by the unpredictable forces of nature. Another textual alteration hides a cultural historical memento of the public perception of waters in Victorian times. Alice's shapeshifting is induced by picking up the white rabbit's fan, but in the earlier underground version, the rabbit drops a nosegay, and Alice shrinks and falls into the pool after smelling the flowers. Could this be a nod to the great stink of London during the hot summer of 1858, when city dwellers tried to protect themselves from the unpleasant stench of the pestilential stream of contaminated Thames water with bouquets of flowers? The body seeking vegetal assistance for sanitary safety emerges as an organism endangered by epidemic, fitting the black humorous aspect of Carolian writing. The Pool of Tears reveals water's common cultural misconceptions as well. On sensing the saltiness of the pool, Alice believes that she can find her way back home. For, and this is the quotation, she had been to the seaside once in her life and had come to the general conclusion that wherever you go to on the English coast, you'll find a number of bathing machines in the sea, some children digging in the sand with wooden spades, and then a row of lodging houses, and behind them a railway station. So the logical flows and the false generalization in this erroneous chain of association that traces a path from the sea to the station and then back home, it mistakes the unknowable aquatic realm for a picture postcard scenery of a bourgeois beach resort. When Alice realizes her misrecognition, the familiar turns unfamiliar, and an uncanny sense of disorientation replaces her topographical self confidence. The Pool of Tears obviously refers to Darwinism. The miniaturization of Alice entertains young readers with a cuteness aesthetics. It may also reflect Carroll's desire to keep his child friends small. But a play with size and scale is also relatable to microscopy mania, the wonders emerging in a drop of water under the magnifying glass. The deep dive initiates a journey back to prehistoric times, to our common aquatic evolutionary origins in the primal ocean where all life begins. Among the numerous Darwinian allusions, the cuckoo's race stages a struggle for the survival of the sweetest. The dodo bird, as the artist Dodson's self-portrait commemorates extinct species, and the baby turning into a pig denotes degeneration. Alice's becoming an aquatic creature, splashing in her own tears, indicates a regression in a psychological sense. This is a kind of an infantilization, a relapse into a non-verbal incapacity, a fall back into an amniotic fluid. But it's also a decline on the evolutionary scale. Carroll challenges species hierarchization by anthropomorphizing animals and also by transforming Alice into this self-liquefying watery being, a sort of a missing link in an increasingly fluid great chain of beings. A girl child balances in a transitional limbo between animal instincts. We can think of Alice's oral fixation, but also an adult human knowledge. Alice self-reflectively attempts to discipline herself. She's scolding herself for crying. So Alice's watery becoming reveals both the absurdity and then the ethical lesson of this unstable in-betweenness, toying with the idea of a liquid eco-intersubjectivity. Alice's failed attempts at conversing with the mouse swimming next to her challenge her human egocentrism and mock the utopia of interspecies solidarity. The mentioning of her cat evokes a threat of predatoriness for the mouse instead of comfort and reminds of the unstable positions on the food chain. It mythifies the subject reduced to eater or eaten. However, floating side by side, all threatened by the possibility of drowning, also stages shared vulnerabilities. A vision of flood recalls the trope of death as the great equalizer, even if Alice's tsunami of tears is an odd reenactment of an inconsequential aquatic apocalypse in miniature. The pool is made out of Alice's own tears. The gaping mouth, the leaking eyes, the trembling, sobbing body overflowing with body fluids belongs to the Bacchinian carnivalesque that invested corporeal transgressions with a social critical potential. The grotesque hyperbolism of the body fluid's anarchic flow, the blurring of the boundaries between inside and outside watery substance represent a liberation from the yokes of normative body discipline. Just like language games disrupt conventional meanings, the liquefaction of the self fluidifies identity to open up a possibility to become anyone, everyone, no one, fading, dripping, blending back into nature, and becoming like nature, uncontrollable. Aquatic fairy tale fantasies can be interpreted from a hydrofeminist perspective. An eco-consciousness is raised by recalling that we are not only surrounded by bodies of water, but we are also bodies of water ourselves. About 60% of our bodily matters are composed of water, and we are connected to a watery planet through a fluid continuum of nature cultural assemblages. This recognition rejects the stigmatization of the female body as a leaking vessel of abject ooziness rooted in the Renaissance tradition. Weeping Alice's wish to escape her claustrophobic entrapment and to get out to the garden's fountains reflects a desire of Niobean porosity, strobingly luscious bodies waiting to be set flowing behind the fossilized facades of the disembodied angel in the house, as Leonard puts it. Alice cries because of fear, frustration, anger, despair, loneliness, shame. So she mocks the sentimentalist cliches of joyful tears and claims children the right to express their emotions freely. Tearful Alice rebels against the Victorian decorum to discipline strong facial expressions as hideous animal residues of primitive physical manifestations of emotional behavior mapped in Darwin's The Expression of the Emotions in Man and Animals. To mock the normalizing agenda of evolutionary psychology, Carroll sent Darwin a photograph titled No Lessons Today, a portrait of a grinning Flora Rankin, a twisted mirror image of weeping Alice. Both girls display extreme emotions to disprove the presumption that grimaces are unfit for aesthetic appreciation and inappropriate themes for art. In affectively engaged unruly bodies, the eruption of fluids, a tearful breakdown, watering mouths, adrenaline rushing in the bloodstream, they mark an escape from socialized embodiment. Tearing up, the involuntary evacuation of water expresses weakness and empowerment, a regression to animality, and a post-human surpassing of the boundaries of the skin ego. As Astrida Naimanis puts it, the flow beyond the sense of self towards a more than human watery embodiment is an attunement opening up to inundation, aquatic wonders, shared fluidity, an empathic potentiality of becoming other. Carroll's aquatic fantasy resonates with the tear motif in Hans Christian Andersen's fairy tales, informed by the Christian idea of the lachrymose sublime, holy tears shed by martyr saints as promises of otherworldly consolation. The Little Mermaid romanticizes the biblical passion and transubstantiation myths fused with a pantheistic aspect. Throughout watery metamorphosis, a chimeric sea monster, half fish, half woman, yearning for love, gains a beautiful human body, disabled by muteness, chronic arthritic pain, and hemophilia. With a broken heart, she then dissolves into sea form, but as a reward for her self-sacrifice, she is transformed into a spirit, a daughter of air, who may ascend to heaven when her lifespan ends. The Little Mermaid is a floating figure in between human and animal, earth and sea, a soulless being unable to shed tears, but her bloody steps mark the fleshly fragility of her anthropomorphic anatomy and her sublime suffering. Tears hold an ambiguous meaning in Andersen's tale. They express a hierarchy between species related to humans' capacity and the beasts, including the mermaids' inability to express emotions. They are also signs of redemption. And finally, they introduce an interactive cautionary element in the text, warning that tears shed because of naughty children will delay the final metamorphosis and redemption. A teary, melancholic yearning for becoming another is always part of the mermaid's being. Carroll's picture of Beatrice Hatch recalls the tale in the hybrid medium of a paintograph, a photograph painted over by watercolors by Anne Lydia Boyd at Carroll's instructions. The dreamy vision of a naked child wandering on the shore, suspended between land and sea, fuses the ambiguity of the Little Mermaid and the Victorian girl. She's a transitional figure between child and adult, angel and beast, ignorance and wisdom, instincts and culture, prolapsarian innocence and vital material agency. She's fading back into nature but also observing nature. The aquarelle technique captures her fluidity. Embracing herself in a fetal position, her self-absorbed contemplation highlights the unreadability of her thoughts and her intimacy with the sea. The same posture of a girl crouching on a seaside appears in John Tannell's illustration to Wonderland's The Mock Turtle story. The human child here sits between two imaginary beings, the Gryphon and the Mock Turtle. The latter is a specimen of culinary nonsense, a pun on a Victorian dish, the mock turtle soup in which expensive green turtle meat was substituted by a calf's head to copy the original flavor. After a mock fairy tale beginning, once I was a real turtle, the tragic tale turns into a farce, a joke on delusion. The mock turtle's sighing and sobbing are referentless signifiers, for it's all his fancy, he hasn't got no sorrow, as we learned from the Gryphon. The animal body fluid's spontaneous outbursts mimics Alice's tears, and the salty sea waves do, to express the creature's grotesque, melancholic wish to return to the primordial soup. And finally, I would like to say a few words about contemporary adaptations which reveal the rich interpretive possibilities of Carolian waters. Elena Carlis's mesmerizing underwater photography resists gravitation. The floating creates a sense of dreamy destabilization through a liquefaction of the Victorian tableau vivant genre. In American Maggie's computer game, traumatized Alice seeks her way out of a valley of tears, fighting army ants and panic attacks amidst troubled waters of her unconscious. Jens Schwankmayer's surrealist puppetry plays with infantile fears of body horror. The mouse builds a campfire on Alice's head, and the girl underwater transforms into a doll doppelganger. In the Royal Ballet performance, the stage design foregrounds Wonderland's intermedial dynamics. Alice swims amidst letters scattered around and in the pool and sails away on a paper boat folded from the pages of a book. Salvador Dali's and Camille Rose Garcia's paintings picture rain and tears as forces of nature inciting watery becomings. These adaptations, as the original, uh, show that reading through Blue Humanities allows us to dive deep amidst boisterous waves of meaning. And thank you very much for your attention. I will stop sharing.
Thank you. Thank you so much. That was wonderful. I know that, water is always a very psychological thing, and it's very interesting how much water there is in the works of Lewis Carroll, and I like your interpretations. I wanted to tell everybody that we can do some question and answer right now. And if you put it in the question and answer box, because I cannot see the chat for some reason, so I apologize for that. For people that came in late, Heather Simmons, our wonderful host, is having some electrical problems in California. Her electricity's off. So I'm filling in. I'm Ellie Schaefer-Salins, and I'm filling in as a co-host until Heather gets set up. But if there's any questions, please put them in the question and answer box. I don't see any at the moment. But I never heard, I wanted to ask you about the hydrofeminist part that you said. Can you explain a little bit more about what you meant by hydrofeminist?
Mhm. So this is a kind of a post-humanist contemporary approach, which definitely obviously connects to eco-criticism. But I think that it wonderfully resonates with this Victorian idea that I mentioned at the very beginning, that you have this kind of a parallel that you can spot between the attempt to organize, to control voters on the outside, like the purification of polluted rivers or sewage systems and so on, or the steam power, and then the water inside. So it's based on this kind of the recognition of the connectivity of how we are somehow should consider challenging this assumption of the anthropocentrism and this kind of the species is the hierarchy, that human being is kind of logically above all the other creatures on earth, and how water as this kind of element that all living beings somehow share with one another, both as a thing that our livelihood depends on, but also as a thing that our bodies are made of. This can be this kind of a connecting entity. But I think it's something that is a very interesting kind of theoretical perspective through which we can give a new interpretation to the Pool of Tears episode.
Okay, thank you so much.
Yeah, everybody. Hi. Anna, thank you so much. Ellie, did you have more questions for Anna?
That was my big question. I also thought that the Darwinism, looking at Darwin and how it connects to the writings, was very interesting too. So thank you very, very much for that. It was very interesting.